So I'm aware that Councillor Gangel has already indicated he wants to move the OSCE recommendation, but are there any further questions?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you, Worship. I actually went back and looked at the original agenda that Council adopted the differential rates with. And what I specifically went back to do is actually to read out the proportion of the report where staff's concerns were raised to Council. Upon reading the report online, there are in fact no concerns raised by staff in their report to Council in relation to rush timeframes or anything of the like. I'd just like to ask the staff why, if they believed that there was a rush timeframe initially, was that not in their report to Council when we adopted differential rates?
Thanks, Councillor Gangel. Can I just outline on page 105 of 127 of the Ordinary Council agenda of the 23rd of July, where staff outlined an option to defer the consideration of implementation of differential rating to allow for further research and analysis. Differential rating is one of a number of policy levers available to local governments which, if used judiciously, can facilitate desired outcomes. The compressed time frame between the Council resolution on the 18th of June 2019 and the proposal to implement differential rating to take effect in the 1920 financial year has resulted in limited time to consider the factors to support differential rating, that is the objects and reasons, and analyse the impacts or potential consequences, including unintended, of implementing differential rating in the current environment. Community consultation has reinforced this. If the option of examining the feasibility of implementing differential rating is preferred, this work, if deemed a priority by Council, can be resourced appropriately and undertaken during the 1920 financial year as a priority project with potential implementation in 2021 subject to Council approval.
Thank you for that clarification. So, subsequent to that, Council resolved to go out to advertising, is that correct?
That's right.
We went out to advertise. What I'm referring to is yes, I appreciate that was...
Sorry, Councillor Gangel, just to correct you, this was after receiving the feedback from the advertising.
So I've got the agenda from the meeting on Tuesday the 18th of June 2019.
Oh, no, we're looking at the one from July, which is when Council chose to adopt...
Oh, my apologies. So this is the one we were initially going to advertise, and then we got the feedback back, and that's the... Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I was looking at the wrong agenda. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, you have a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just further to my line of questioning about the 2 categories versus 3 categories, I've had the benefit of reading correspondence from the department to the town during the adjournment, and at point 2 in the letter it says that the town advertised 2 differentials but finally adopted 3 differentials. Is it the case that the 3 differentials are the basic rate, the vacant commercial and industrial, and the vacant residential being the 3rd category? Is that your understanding of what the 3rd differential is? It's the vacant residential.
Yes, so the town, that's right, the town advertised essentially, to keep it simple terms, non-vacant and vacant being 2, and adopted non-vacant and 2 forms of vacant, one being commercial and industrial, the other being residential. Yes.
Okay. So if instead Council adopts vacant commercial and industrial as one category and all other land, then is that not just 2 categories?
I don't think the issue is the number of categories. I think it's the categories are different from what we advertised.
Okay. In what way are they different?
Because when we advertised vacant land, residential was included with commercial and industrial in the one vacant category.
Yes. So the purpose of seeking feedback from the community and considering feedback from the community, as I understand it, is then allowing Council the ability to slightly change what it is that it ultimately decides to do based on community feedback. Is that your understanding?
Yes, but the Act restricts what changes can be made. it allows, without further advertising, council to modify the proposed rates or minimum payments after considering those submissions.
And my recollection was that council did modify those proposed rates with respect to residential land, which is where I think we've fallen foul here. Yes. But I also note in your report, it says that in the Act at section 6.364, local government is required to consider any submissions received. I think we did that. It then goes on to say at section 6.365, where local government proposes to modify the proposed rates after considering submissions, it is not required to give local public notice of the proposed supplementary general rate. So if council ultimately decides that it will remove the variation to vacant residential, are we required to go back to public consultation after that?
That's what advice has been sought on at this point, because the question is the difference essentially between what we advertised is that now residential is not included in the rating category that we advertised. It's now only commercial and industrial.
Yes, but I feel that that's contemplated by that section of the Act that says if, after considering submissions, makes a variation, they're not required to go back out for advertising. So we advertised, we received submissions, we considered them, and we made a decision on that. I don't see how it is that we've created a requirement to go back out to advertise.
Well, I think it turns on section 6.365B of the Act, which states where a local government proposes to modify the proposed rates or minimum payments after considering any submissions under subsection 4, it is not required to give local public notice of that proposed supplementary general rate, specified area rate, modified rate or minimum payment. So it hinges on those terms.
Yes, but then it seems to me from the correspondence that the only part that council has fallen foul of that requirement is with respect to vacant residential land. Are you able to show me anywhere where we've fallen foul of that requirement with respect to vacant commercial or vacant industrial? In my view, the category is advertised with vacant commercial, vacant residential, vacant industrial as a category. Mm-hmm. Now that category doesn't include vacant residential.
Councillor, one more question, then Councillor Pumpkin would like to ask something.
That's right, because after receiving feedback from the community, we made a variation within that category, which it appears to me is contemplated within the Act as being permissible, which is why there's no requirement to go back out to public notice afterwards. So, is it not the case that if we removed the council decision with respect to vacant residential land, then the vacant commercial and the vacant industrial that we applied in the budget is exactly the same as what we advertised? How is it possible that we are in breach of the Act if we decide to remove the non-compliant part and keep the other two parts in place?
Firstly, given that we've only received this afternoon, I don't feel that I've had a chance to take advice on that particular question. I don't wish to debate the law, but it does create somewhat of a difference because there were 198 properties in that category of vacant land when we advertised, and there would now be 16, and consequently those 16 property owners would now contribute a slightly different proportion to the overall rates contribution or rates burden of the town than what they would have under the proposal that was advertised. So I think there is a slight difference there.
One final question,
Yes.
with your indulgence, Your Worship. Whilst it might be possible that the proportion is different, the exact amount of the rate is unchanged from what was advertised, though. So,
vacant commercial industrial, yes.
are you able to point to anywhere in the Act that says that we must consider the proportionality of a category in making our decision?
No, but it may well be a factor which has caused the legislators to consider what needs to be advertised.
Councillor Hamilton?
Okay, so reading this copy of this email that you received on Thursday, I believe it was, yes. So point 2, the town advertised 2 differentials but finally adopted 3 differentials. Whilst the Local Government Association allows the Local Government Act, allows the council to amend the rate in the dollar and or the minimum amount after public advertising, it does not allow for new differentials to be adopted without satisfying the public advertising requirement. Now, following on from the questions that Councillor Wilson has indicated, I read that as saying that if we remove the non-compliant residential, which was the 3rd category that we created through our resolution, that we revert back to 2 categories and we become compliant. Now, this is a matter of interpretation. You've said that yourself, okay? So my next question is relating to the fact that why would the Local Government Act require us to go to public advertising and to bring those responses back to council for their consideration if we are not to consider those responses?
Well, the Local Government Act allows you to consider those responses.
Correct.
And to alter the rate of the dollar, the minimum payment as we've been talking about. It turns on a question of law in that has this change resulted in does removal of the residential component result in a change in the structure of that rating category, or is it merely by excising the residential component merely resulting in a change to the amount or the payment? That's essentially the question that we're debating here tonight.
As opposed to should we or should we not consider the input from those residential responses, which we did. We considered those quite strongly and considered that the amount advertised was excessive for the residential component, which is why we ended up in this situation where we created a category that was quite low for the resident. So we actually considered the responses as required by the Act, and we made a decision. Now, obviously, the way that we made that decision was incorrect because we created a 3rd category. I acknowledge that also that 3rd category is non-compliant with the 50% rule in regards to the minimum. But I dispute, and I'm sorry, but...
Councillor Hamilton, are you asking a question?
Well, I am asking a question because if we are to consider community consultation and feedback, and we amend according to that feedback, why is that worth so much less than this supposed category?
That we can answer tonight.
The Act allows you to amend certain things, the rate and the minimum payment, on a category that's already been advertised. That's what the Act says.
Councillor Ganger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I'm trying to untangle the web a little bit here. So I've now gone to the agenda 1014 of the council meeting. I'm just wondering, what was it that the CEO was reading from previously? Because I can't find it in the...
That was officer recommendation from the
23rd of July.
Yeah, 23rd of July.
Is that 1014?
Yeah, but on the officer recommendation,
Yes.
I've got his 1015.
No, but I'm looking at it. But I'm looking at it online, the agenda online.
So
And what page was that statement on?
105.
105.
Towards the bottom of 105.
Under option 6.
Would you like my
Okay.
copy?
Oh, no, here we go. No, I just wanted to bring myself to reference, sir. Then I'm just wondering, given the staff's advice there on that, the officer recommendation then subsequently went on, despite the staff's hesitance and warning about it, the officer recommendation then went on to say selects the preferred option, including the officer report, to implement differential ratings. Why then, if the staff had serious concerns about the time frame, was there not a recommendation to council not to endorse the differential ratings for 1920?
So I was hoping that that option would stand on its own and that council would take on that advice along with considering those other options, but an alternate option was selected.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, so Councillor Ganjel has moved the officer recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brown, I'm assuming there is people against. Yes, Councillor Ganjel, would you like to move?
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, certainly what we're discussing here tonight could be described as the Bassendean budget blues. We need to resolve this, and I appreciate Councillor Hamilton's endeavours to have differential rates looked at, and I certainly can testify that Councillor Hamilton, probably since day dot of her election, it's been one of her issues that she has pursued. Now, unfortunately, due to the constrained time frame of the eventuality of it from the original outset of the notice of motion, which then triggered the entire process, to the special council meeting, to the report subsequently coming back to council for the adoption. I just feel, and I have expressed this numerous times, that the justifications have been stated that they were quite literally copied and pasted from other local governments. There was no analysis done to justify the implementation of differential rates in Bassendean. Despite the staff's warnings in relation to the officer report on point 6 in the recommendation, council continued to progress with implementing a differential rate. It is unfortunate that it has come to this tonight, but it is now time for council to actually look at it, stop the situation, clean up the mess tonight, move on from this, learn from it, and rescind as the officer recommendation so suggests. And I would sincerely urge councillors to listen to the officer recommendations, the officer recommendation as tabled, to make sure we are undertaking a sound process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ganjel. Councillor Brown? Is there a speaker against? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So following on from the line of questioning that I made, it appears that the point of contention here circles around the definition of the word category. We have advice in the officer report stating that we have created a third category. It seems to me on the face of it that that third category is with respect to vacant residential land. There is nothing that I can see in the officer's advice or in the correspondence that we've just been provided with that talks about commercial land or industrial land. It appears to me that staff have taken a very expansive view on what the definition of the word category means, which I don't think is justified by the advice that they have considered in providing advice to us. I oppose this motion with the desire to second an amendment that has been circulated by Councillor Hamilton, and I urge all councillors to look at that with an open mind. It appears to me that if we remove or rescind that part of the resolution that related to vacant residential land, then we still have two categories. And those categories that we adopted would be the same as those categories that we advertised, and I do not believe that staff have asked the question, if vacant residential land was removed from it, would it comply? And in the absence of such a question and the absence of such an answer, I think it would be very remiss of us to make a decision which would impact our budget bottom line, which would reduce the amount of roads that we have available, just based on a guess as to what it is category might mean. I do not think that any common sense reading of it would hold that if we rescinded the words in relation to vacant residential land, that we would be in breach of the Act. In fact, I'm fairly confident that if we did rescind those words, if we voted down the motion moved by Councillor Gangel and instead voted up the resolution circulated by Councillor Hamilton, if we remove the words in relation to vacant residential land, we would be in compliance with the Act, because there would be two categories. There would be all rates and vacant industrial and commercial, which is what we advertised and what we adopted unchanged. If anyone disagrees, I welcome the explanation as to why.
Well, you've already waived.
Yes, you have.
Yep. Is there another speaker?
Are you speaking?
Councillor Hamilton?
Okay. Councillor Gangel's correct. I have been trying to bring the discussion about differential rating to the table, well, this year from February onwards. Rather unsuccessfully, in that I wished to do it through a concept workshop, but in the end, because of delays, I brought it via a motion. Because time was running out, and I was aware that there's a timeline in respect to the implementation of differential rating. So, in one respect, Councillor Gangel is correct. Not since day dot, but certainly since February, I have been interested in a fairer, more equitable system of rating for our townsfolks. That's what I wanted. That's all I wanted. We are well aware in this town that we have long-term vacant land that's been sitting there underutilised, gathering dumped goods, basically overgrown, feral-looking land. Okay. Residents often say to us, we want the place to be more vibrant, more active, we want more people in our shops, we want this, we want that. And yet we will sit there and allow vacant land to be vacant year in, year out, paying minimal rates and achieving nothing. So, we have this proposal, and we have this letter which was only provided to us halfway through the meeting tonight, stating that we are in error with the Act because we created 3 categories instead of 2. I concur with Councillor Wilson. The way I read this letter is that if we remove the vacant residential, which created the 3rd category, that we revert back to 2 categories. I concur with that assessment of the wording of this letter. I also reiterate what Councillor Wilson has said, that is an interpretation of the Act. It is by no means cast in iron that we must delete this entire resolution, we must get rid of it and not be compliant. It is simply a matter of interpretation, and we have not had the time as councillors, because we only received the documentation for this after lunch today. So we've not had time to actually make our own investigations. So it's not only the administration that is sometimes robbed of time, it happens to be councillors as well on a regular basis. So I would ask that the officer's recommendation be defeated and that we go to my alternative, which allows us to delete the residential component and to make further inquiries with the department. And a special council meeting, as we know from tonight, can be called very, very quickly.
Councillor Hamilton, you need to wind up, please.
So I would urge councillors to reject this officer's recommendation and to actually look at my alternative. Thank you.
I'd like to speak for the motion. As councillors will recall, back in July when this first came for a decision, I was in the minority that didn't support pursuing differential rates at the time. I was in no way opposed to investigating them in future, but I was aware of what the staff were recommending to us at the time, which was that they had not had adequate ability to fully explore this as per their option 6 in the officer report. Which is why at the time I chose not to support pursuing differential rates this year. Obviously, Councillor Hamilton has worked very hard in pushing this, and I think her motivation is very good. But there have been a lot of challenges this year, as you all know, with a massive restructure, changes of staff, particularly in the area around corporate services. So even though this was initially presented as being something fairly simple, it has imposed an enormous burden on our staff. And we are now in the same situation. We were back in July where we've got something before us which has not been fully explored and which is again putting staff and councillors under pressure for really what is going to be a very small amount of money in the end, either way whether this goes through or not. I take a different view on the wording of the Act in 6.365. It says that we can propose to modify the rates or the minimum payments. It does not say we can modify the category. So we have had advice from the department that has already raised concerns. We've had advice from our staff. It may be that we have until Friday, but that is the date that we have to have our rates notices out by. We have to first of all seek the advice. We need to get a response. We need to have advice from our staff. We need to have another meeting. We need to put those rates notices out, which is unrealistic to expect of our staff by this Friday. I think that we need to learn from this and give the staff the opportunity over the next few months to come to us with a fully formed proposal so that we don't find ourselves in this situation again. So I'd encourage you to support the officer recommendation and revisit this again for the next budget period. Thank you. I'm getting no, so if not everyone's in agreement, I think we need to stick to the standing orders, Councillor Brown. Anybody else like to speak other than Councillor Brown? Councillor Gangel, please close.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I've been completely consistent on this matter. I do not support differential ratings in the town. Certainly, most definitely not in the current climate. Councillor Hamilton spoke about having vibrancy and the like, and I certainly support that, wholeheartedly support that, and I look to put initiatives forward that actually do that. I don't believe differential rating will achieve that considering the current market with land sales. The town of Bassendean, our own town, our own council, cannot sell land to build a very worthy playground. So we ourselves struggle to sell land in the current market to actually benefit our community, yet we're impinging on those, not even knowing their circumstances fully, not having the time to analyse what situations have developed for people to have the vacant land. We did hear various different reasons with people submitting submissions during the time, but we weren't able to have fully analysed them. Could I thank the staff wholeheartedly for the budget preparations? There's been a giant upheaval, and quite frankly, to have the budget as well submitted to us as it was somewhat of a miracle. I support the budget. I think it's a good budget, other than the differential ratings side of things. I think currently we are boxing in shadows, so we're jumping from one conclusion to another. Should this not get up, I'll certainly support a deferral. I'm happy to come back tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, to get it sorted. But I would urge councillors to think, though, how this makes the town look by continuously having to come back on the same issue, and how potentially we can avoid the Bassendean budget blues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. So all those in favour, Councillor Gangel, Brown and McLennan, and against, Councillor Wilson, Hamilton, no, you're not voting? And Quinton. So Councillor
I would like
Wilson.
to ask the CEO a question before I vote.
No, you can't. Standing orders. You need a vote.
So if I don't vote, I get a code of conduct. Would that be correct?
We have to vote if you're in the room.
I don't have to vote. It's a free country. I can do as I please.
room.
You have to vote. If you're in the room, you have to vote.
Okay, so hold on, we'll let's see your answer.
Yeah, I think if you're participating in this meeting as a councillor, there's a requirement to vote. It's part of your duties as a councillor. So I think the option is you're either part of the meeting or not part of the meeting.
Part of the council or not part of the council?
Or part of this particular meeting or not. So if you choose not to vote, maybe best if you leave the room.
I won't be leaving the room either. So a code of conduct would be forthcoming if I refused to vote.
Well, you don't have that option. You have to vote.
So what's an absolute majority these days?
Okay, so whether you're voting or not, we still need to put
there
it
needs
to
to
the
be 4
vote.
votes for an absolute majority.
It needs what?
4 votes for an absolute majority.
This
So
is a
we've got
disgrace.
Councillor Gangel, Brown and McLennan against, Councillor Wilson, Hamilton and Quinton against, so that is lost because it doesn't have an absolute majority. Councillor Hamilton, did you want to move your alternative?
Yep. That Council 1 rescinds OCM 19.19.2 Part B, which reads B, GRV vacant residential land greater than the dollar of 0.08 and a minimum rates of 1,200, and 2, endorses the proposed administrative approach to retrieve the rates notices for vacant residential property prior to issue and reissuing of an interim rates adjustment to apply the standard rate of 7.302 and minimum rate of 1,106. 3, notes the proposed covering letter to be sent to affected ratepayers as attached to the Special Council agenda of the 3rd of September 2019 with amendment to reflect reference to vacant residential land. And 4, considers the effect on budgeted revenue as part of the 2019-20 budget review.
Seconder?
No, I have a question.
Yes.
If the vote goes the same way as it did on the last vote and there's no absolute
Then I would be
majority.
proposing a deferral so that...
Right.
Councillor Wilson, was that seconding?
Yes, thank you, Worship.
Okay. Against is Councillor Gangel. Did you want to speak again, Councillor Hamilton?
Only very quickly
Have your opportunity to speak now, Councillor Brown.
to say that I am aware of the hard work that staff put in. I am grateful for the hard work that staff put in. And I would have much preferred a different scenario to where we are tonight. That's an absolute. I don't enjoy being in a situation where we're at loggerheads like this over something that really should have been more straightforward. I think it's destructive to be in this situation. However, I also believe, having read the correspondence that came from the department, that this is an issue which can be resolved by simply deleting the category of residential vacant. Now that's my firm belief. I would not be standing here arguing so vehemently about this if I didn't hold that belief. Now obviously there are others in the room with a different opinion, and I respect the fact that we have differences of opinions. However, this process has been rather exhausting, and that's it.
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Brown, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm delighted to second this motion because it is consistent with all of the decisions we've made as a council to date on this question. It is clear that inadvertently we have fallen foul of a requirement in the Act that talks about the percentage of houses that will be on a minimum rate. This is not something that anyone could foresee, no one in the council and certainly no one on the staff, as to what number of houses a minimum rate would apply to until the decision was made. Moving on from that, it is clear to me that the only way that we have fallen foul is with respect to creating a third category in residential vacant land. I am confident that if we support Councillor Hamilton's resolution, we remove the part that is non-compliant and we retain the part that we advertised, that we took feedback on and that we adopted unchanged, and then re-ask the question of the department. I'm confident that it is possible we will get a different answer. We're all just speculating. But what I do not want to do is make a decision that's going to impact our budget based on speculation. I want to know what the actual answer is to the situation that removes the non-compliant part that is discussed in here before conceding the point about vacant commercial and vacant industrial. And if this resolution gets up, which I hope it does, I'm confident that staff will prosecute the case very concisely with respect to the fact that there are only 2 categories, not 3, as a result of the rescission part of this motion, and that reason and common sense will prevail, and that the balance of our budget will be deemed to be compliant. And I urge you all to support the motion.
Councillor Brown, did you wish to speak?
Thanks. I remind myself that my original position was to apply differential rating to commercial properties only, and I had a good reason for that. And that's why I didn't vote for the proposal when it last came to council. I wonder if we'd be in this position now if that had been listened to and adopted. The decision, the advice is not some unilateral decision made by a bureaucrat in Walga. I'm sure they are acting on sound legal advice. And our officers made their recommendation based on that sound advice. Another option that we had not considered was, had the previous resolution been passed, we still had the option of our officer going to Walga tomorrow morning to get a response to our concerns, and then, if they said that we were lawful, to come back to a special council meeting. We hadn't considered that option, which would have been available to us. That's why I wanted to speak last time. We are in a difficult position, and if they don't give us a response tomorrow, if indeed they give us a response, and that response is no, we are still in an unlawful position. What will happen then? We'll have to have another council meeting anyway, because we will be in breach, and our reputation will be damaged if we don't get a decision well before this Friday. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Yes, thank you. I concur with Councillor Wilson and Councillor Hamilton for the reasons that we aren't armed with the complete suite of information in order to make this decision. I know that we've received very sound advice, and I thank the officers and the CEO greatly for the work that they've done in trying to get us to this point. We too are learning through this process, but not everything is lost at this point. I do feel like there is one last point, and if we have to come back tomorrow night to rescind the second part of the motion, then so be it. But some advice that I heard earlier tonight was that the rates notices have already gone out, and those companies or owners of the industrial vacant land have already started to receive their rates notices, so the rush to Friday isn't as imminent as everybody is making out. So we still might be able to get rates notices changed if necessary within the next 24 hours. My main concern for this though is that it's not just $60,000. $60,000 is a lot of money. $60,000 does a huge amount in this community. $60,000 pays for one drum. So there is a lot we can do with that money. And I think at this point, given we don't have all of the information, let's just get it first. Let's just be absolutely sure And then tomorrow night, let's make a decision if we necessarily have to, because it would be a loss of quite a lot of money. So I would be saying let's support Councillor Hamilton's amendment and move forward from there.
Councillor Ganger?
Thank you very much. Look, again, I would urge Council, we are having the Bassendean budget blues, but should this progress on, we'll come into Council chaos. So we want to avoid going from the Bassendean budget blues to Council chaos whilst we try to fix this situation up. Clearly there has been advice given. I'm not too sure personally, I'm not too sure what is the fixation that Council has with slugging the ratepayers of this town, differential rate this particular year without anything being analysed. There's no analysis done. The actual justifications were cut and paste from other councils. Oh, that looks good, we'll just cut and paste that and whack that on our notice. So there's no actual proof that what we are charging them differential rates for actually applies, but yet there's still a fixation to do it. Just quite frankly bizarre. But I would urge council to consider that tonight. I think it is the best way to cut the losses, to look at this again fresh if councils wish to pursue it in the next financial year. But as I have said earlier, I will support a deferral motion, and I will be available at any time after working hours for another meeting to sort this out. Thank you very much.
I'm hearing people talking about deferral motions. Are we wanting to do a deferral at this point in time? No, we want to do a vote on this one. Okay. Councillor Hamilton, do you want to speak again?
No, thank you.
No? Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Wilson, Hamilton, Quinton. All those against? Councillor Gangel, Brown and McLennan. So that is lost. Can I move that we defer this until the staff have sought some advice from the department around whether or not the categories that we have potentially that we could potentially adopt under Councillor Hamilton's proposal be investigated tomorrow. Is there a second for the deferral? Councillor Gangel. Councillor Wilson, did you have a question? Or?
Yes, thank you. I have a question. Just to clarify specifically what it is that's going to be put to the staff of the department. So do you mean to say that if we removed the residential vacant land, would it be compliant if we kept the commercial and industrial vacant land? Is that specifically?
That's my understanding. Is that what you would be intending to see?
Yes, that's right.
And that question will be in writing, and the response will be in writing, and both copies of correspondence will be provided to staff. Is that intended? To council, is that intended?
I would anticipate, given the short time frame, it would be in writing, perhaps via email. I don't know when we will receive a response.
Councillors, can I just check whether there is any other question which we require the staff to get clarification on? No? Okay, so I've moved to defer. Councillor Gangel has seconded. Is there anyone against? All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Meeting closed at 9:45 p.m.